Hey friends, it's Thursday, so you know that means it is time for Action Figure Impact, where I talk off the top of my head about an action figure that represents a wrestler who had impactful run in TNA Impact Wrestling, pun intended, of course. This guy has had one of the most interesting stories in wrestling. I am just going to give you the cliff notes, and it is a pretty good story just from that. Um, the first time that a lot of people saw the guy, he was in NXT, which is WWE's developmental brand, and he was known by the name of Derek Bateman, a frizzy-haired kind of light heavyweight, very vanilla kind of character, and he did not a lot of anything in WWE on that particular run. Cut to a few months after his leaving WWE, you know, um, Dixie Carter, who is a very interesting and polarizing character in wrestling, um, she's going to bring in a family member. Now, Dixie Carter, she was not um, in the wrestling business, but she is an heiress to Panda Energy. I believe they are worth about $5 billion. And so, she was very much, you know, um, coming from wealth and a silver spoon. And what she did with her parents' money was really keep TNA wrestling afloat at one of the many perilous times that they've had. I mean, if you know anything about TNA wrestling, Impact Wrestling, is that it seems like every 3 years they are on the verge of disaster. And then something happens. Dixie Carter comes along. Jeff Jarrett comes back. Billy Corgan comes along. Something happens to put them back on the right money making track. And fortunately, right now they're on one of those upswings, to where they're really making money and they're putting on quality wrestling. And they actually have a working relationship with WWE right now. Um, but anyway, back to EC3, Derek Bateman. He is introduced to TNA Wrestling as the nephew of Dixie Carter, and so he is brought in at the very top of the card. Which is a cool thing of when you can tie a character to another person that gives them validity and a reason to be at the position they're in. A lot of guys, they come into a company and they have to work their way up. They have to earn it. They have to earn the fans' respect. If they're a heel, they have to put in their time. If they're a bad guy, if they're a good guy, there's no way unless they already have a previous name, you can bring them in and put them on top. But with her nephew, Ethan Carter III, where we get EC3 from, he was very much a nepotism baby, which means that he could be put on the card anywhere as a bad guy because why in the hell would he need to earn it? He's the boss's nephew. He is in that, paying the energy money. And, I think it was a very cool way and a very good opportunity for him to very quickly ascend to the top of TNA Impact Wrestling. He won the major heavyweight title there twice. After, his run in Impact, he had built a lot of credibility and his name, and it had actually gotten quite a bit bigger as well, physically. And WWE came calling again, and he was brought back to NXT, but he wasn't brought back as Derek Bateman, this unknown bland babyface. He was EC3, and he was never really given a full name like where Impact he was Ethan Carter III, because Dixie Carter wasn't a character, wasn't a person in NXT or WWE universe. And so they really didn't give him a name outside of those three initials. But he was EC3, former heavyweight champion, and a guy who they really didn't expect to be in NXT, the developmental brand, for that long. But he did some fun things in NXT. He had lots of great feuds. The most memorable, from my opinion, is with Patrick Clark, the Velveteen Dream, and he did some big things in NXT, and eventually got called up, and they really had no plan for him. He was big, impressive looking, great in the ring, but the first few weeks they had him on major TV, he would just be in the back posing in front of a mirror. And people would just walk by and look at him, and he'd just keep posing. And he wouldn't say a word or do anything for weeks. It was a strange thing. But eventually he did get to show what he could do on the main roster. And this was around the time that Dean Ambrose was on his way out of the company. And so they put him with Dean Ambrose in house shows and on TV, in the hopes that, okay, he's supposed to be, going up against Dean Ambrose. Dean Ambrose is this big bad guy, so you want to get people to turn, not only turn against a guy that's leaving the company, but build this guy off of that guy. But the cat was out of the bag. People knew what Dean was going through and that he was heading out, and they could not get the response that they wanted. And soon after that, rumor was, and I'm not an insider, I don't know, but the rumor mill said that he was punished because he could not get people to boo Dean Ambrose in their matches and interactions, and he took the brunt of, what was a poor decision on the people in charge of WWE. But when his contract ran out, and he hit the ground running, and instead of immediately going to AEW or TNA, and he did do a short little spell in TNA and wrestled the current champion, and spent a couple of weeks there, but he very much did his own thing. And instead of going to another major company, he said, I'm gonna be put on my own company. And the way he did it was really creative, where he didn't promote it as a company. He put out these very high quality videos of him kind of speaking into the camera like some kind of zealot or cult leader. And more videos would come out about the narrative and control your narrative. And he would kind of tear apart the characters he played in the past. And the vignettes started showing more of an underground fight feel, and people were talking about the narrative. What is the narrative? And he brought in other disgruntled wrestlers from multiple companies who had been released or quit or felt they weren't being used to their full potential. Braun Strowman was a major partner in Control Your Narrative. One of the first big feuds that he had was against Zack Ryder, and or not Zack Ryder. Now he's known as Matt Cardona, and the preamble for their match was them having a meeting in a diner, kind of talking about wrestling and their careers and how they were perceived. And it felt more like a movie scene than a wrestling promo that you would traditionally see. And these led to the narrative shows, the Control Your Narrative shows, and they were filmed very creatively, I will say. Um, the matches had no pinfalls. You know, it was like knockout or whatever. You had wrestlers that weren't signed to contracts or that were signed to companies that let them work other companies. And, you know, every match was its own story. And there weren't ring entrances. It was like a warehouse at a bar. And I remember one match started with the guy, he was sitting there drinking at the bar, and somebody in the ring said something that pissed him off. So he threw down his drink and walked over to the ring and handled business. And even the commentary was just like two dudes just talking about what was going on. And then they would also have, during the matches, the inner monologue of what was going on in the wrestler's mind. And it was very cinematic, and it was divisive. Um, people loved it or hated it. And there was no middle ground on that. Um, I found it entertaining, but it was a hard watch. But as they were building momentum, Braun Strowman actually got signed again to WWE, and that kind of spelled the end for Control Your Narrative. But what he did was, instead of losing the momentum he built with the narrative, he took, um, that character to NWA Wrestling, which is a company probably the oldest. And while it may not be known to modern day wrestlers, it is, the title is probably the oldest wrestling championship in America and arguably the most prestigious. And so he went to NWA with a bunch of his cohorts from Control Your Narrative and kind of settled in to a groove in NWA shows. And I believe I don't know if they run on YouTube anymore, um, but they ran on the CW, and he is the current champion now there. I haven't seen too much of what he's doing over there, but he's in great shape. He's working great, doing some of the best work of his life, and he's not beholden to one company, and I think that is admirable. Whereas he could have went to a TNA wrestling at a time when they really needed a big name, but he was like, "No, I'm gonna do my own thing." He could have went to AEW. I believe that with the big changes in WWE, he could be in WWE right now if he chose to. But he chose to bet on himself, and from that bet, he currently holds at time of recording the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. And, it's a company that is, on the come up. Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins, he was involved in TNA Impact, but he had a falling out with Dixie Carter. So he bought the NWA. And, since he's been running it, the NWA has had the money to really grow the brand and put on consistent shows. And that is a testament to Billy Corgan. When it first got started up, they had to track down the NWA champion. He was kind of MIA because it was an organization on paper, but really it was a dead brand. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. And I think the EC3, Ethan Carter III, is a great example of, you know, controlling your narrative, doing your own thing, finding your own way, and not settling, and, showing that you can be successful outside of the confines of a bigger company. So anyway, happy Thursday, happy wrestling. If you guys are watching Impact Wrestling, Ring of Honor, let me know in the comments what you guys are watching, what you think of the show. This has been Action Figure Impact with EC3. And while they had the action figure out here, this is a very, it's a cool action figure. Um, but the only complaints I have are the big rubber knee pads that hinder a lot of movement that they were doing back then. And they also only had double joints back when I bought this guy, say about 3 years ago. So, I mean, you don't have the double joints on the arms. You have that limited range of motion, these heavy rubber knee pads that really limit the motion. But it looks like him. You have his EC3 shirt, you have interchangeable hands, and you have that smug, you know, um, privileged face. And, I didn't even talk about, his appearance now. He went from being, the heir of Panda Energy to, shaving his head and really changing his look. And now he's just a tough bastard. So anyway, you guys be easy. I'll see you next time. Until then, keep watching that wrestling. Keep buying them action figures. And I am out.